Welcome to the Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be hear stories from other mothers and top experts in the pregnancy and postpartum care field. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. You can also find us at goldenhour.fm on Instagram for comments and questions. Welcome to today's episode of The Golden Hour. I am your host, Dr. O, and I'm very excited to be joined by our guest, Sarah Peck. Sarah is a registered nurse and a board-certified lactation consultant. She obtained her nursing and master's in science of nursing degrees at University of Illinois, Chicago, and her lactation education and credentials at the University of California, San Diego. She now runs her own business, Nesting Lactation, outside of Los Angeles, where she helps new parents with newborn and infant feeding. And she lives in LA with her husband, Tom, and her daughter, Noble May. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. So many credentials.
Yeah, you have so many credentials. I know. Honestly, one of the conversation is the highlight of doing the podcast, but my favorite is always the beginning blurb, because I'm always just so impressed with the people I have the honor of talking to on this podcast, you being one of them. I think we spent honestly like almost 20 minutes in like a pre-show, if you will, just talking. And it makes me even more enthused about the next hour that we have together. Your knowledge is vast, not only in the many credentials that you have, but your own personal experience caring for families in that crucial postpartum period, but also your own experience as a mom. And so thank you in advance for being open with us and sharing with us today.
Happy to.
Yeah. So I like to start really simply. What made you decide to pursue a career in lactation consulting?
Such a good question. So my first career out of college was acting. So I was an actress. I did sociology and drama in undergrad, and was fascinated by empathy and becoming other people and emotions. And, the sociology brought in the dynamics amongst people. And so always loved that. Thought I would go more of a therapy route if acting didn't work out. But then, as I mentioned in our pre-show chat, my brother was kind of in and out of the hospital growing up. And so I was very comfortable in that space. And so decided, let's roll the dice. I'll apply to nursing school and I'll keep auditioning. And if I book something, I'll do that. And if I get a nursing school, I'll do that. So I got in, and of course, then immediately booked a small independent film. Was very lucky that one of my major professors in nursing school let me do that movie. But
very cool.
Which was very cool. Got to do both. But yeah, went to school, did the dual master's and RN. Kind of opened up the world of medicine kind of behind the curtain of Oz, as you probably did when you went to med school, and all of its cracks and issues, but all of its, wonderful community as well. And really gravitated towards the NICU. So when I did my rotation in the neonatal intensive care unit, I was like totally in love. I loved the babies, the culture, the autonomy, the team mentality, the difficulty, the challenge. And so I went kind of full strength at that goal. Ended up very luckily getting a job in a NICU out of school. But while I was waiting for my RN, which can take a long time in California, I got certified as a lactation consultant, thinking this would be a great supplement to my NICU career. And so, started working bedside, really loved it. But, as COVID started and then wore on, really wanted to, the mental health, the maternal mental health crisis was becoming just so real to me. I'd always done lactation consulting on the side in conjunction with my nursing, and was like, I think I need to take a break from bedside and I need to go full time with this, because I really just want to, similarly to how we're doing right now, sit down with my patients and have the time to hear their full history and help them with this skill that I think is not part of our culture anymore. We're not living in tribes. We're not teaching each other lactation. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. So now I full-time do lactation consulting, newborn care, and education in my community. And it's been incredible. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. I mean, I love your story, right? That at the foundation of it all is just like a deep, like sense of empathy and compassion, right? You're drawn to sociology and the arts because you wanted to connect with humans in some, important way. And then the fact that naturally you found your way to one of the probably more intense nursing fields. NICU is really, you see some of the highest of highs, lowest of lows. And I know that those NICU families, they always say how much they kind of love and are depend on the nursing team and the rest of the NICU staff. And eventually realizing that, we're going to talk about it more, our healthcare system, as amazing and vast as it is, and as many like really truly remarkable endeavors that we're able to embark within our system, it's fractured. And so even for you to recognize that, hey, I need to step away from this to have the connections, the deep connections I need to support families, I think it's remarkable. But I also think that there's clearly a natural course that it took along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I just struggled to really find my place in that system. And now I really do feel like I found it. I think my strength in my personal business is not running it. I kind of look to my husband for guidance on that. He's the MBA, so he helps me there. But my strength is more just love the connections that I make and continue to make, as I'm doing right now. But my community of pediatricians, OBGYNs, occupational therapists, physical therapists, doulas, this whole birth community, once you tap into it, as you know, it is quite small. And we are all have one goal, which is to help people and to make this easier. And we're all kind of working both in the system, but also against the system. So it's, I think the greatest strength we have as providers is working together towards that common goal.
Yeah.
And that this is kind of my part is the breastfeeding part, which I'm really more of like a feeding consultant. I am not a breast is best lactation consultant. So I'm really helping with all feeding modalities and newborn care.
Yeah. I mean, even what you said earlier, you talked about like the tribe, you talked about how we don't live in the setting that we were supposed to originally live in. And this has come up multiple times, like various episodes, because I think about it a lot, because there is something about birth that is like true to the basis of like being an animal species, right? Like we're humans, we're special, yes, but we also truly are animals that naturally gathered in groups. And even as we evolved, those groups became villages and tribes and communities. And even as I'm coaching moms through pregnancy and labor and making women feel empowered, despite, the fear, anxiety that they have, it's just saying like, oh, this is one of the most natural processes that your body physically can do, whether it's labor or feeding your newborn then after. Without modern medicine, bodies just did this, but bodies also did that in like a very different social capacity. And so much when I think about the paucity of postpartum care is actually because of the lack of village, the fact that most of us end up delivering a baby with not so much of a sense of like, oh, but what do I do with this baby? Where does it go? How does it go on my breast? Because normally in that like idyllic tribe, you were surrounded by multiple generations of your family, neighbors, where you just saw birth and birthing and postpartum and feeding in so many different ways that you didn't need to outsource that information. Fast forward, I really do think that part of what inspires me to do this podcast and talk to people like you and hear that you're out there, recreating your own tribe and village in LA is because I think that that's the solution, right? Like, I think if we really think about how to improve postpartum care is recreating that village with whether it's multiple resources or re-enhancing that sense of community. And so, I love that you kind of mentioned the tribe because I think that that's what we're lacking, but that's what we should be trying to reinforce.
Yes. I think whenever a patient asks me, why is this so hard? That for me is the answer, is that technology and capitalism has completely changed the Homo sapien brain has gotten completely ahead of its own evolution. We are alone in these homes with our partners who have the best of intentions, but are not a full tribe of other people going through similar experiences. So the reason why, while this may be natural, while breastfeeding is natural, while childbearing and rearing is natural for our species, it is not intuitive. It is not easy. And it would be made much easier if we still had this tribal mentality and system of support. And we just don't. And that's why it's hard. And I mentioned this before we started recording, but it was hard for me. I've done this. So I just had my first daughter 16 months ago. And I've done this, like you said, since 2017, 2018. And it was difficult for me. And I quote unquote have all the answers. I've got the keys to the castle. But I don't, I was still in the same spot. I came up against a lot of struggled with postpartum anxiety. I mean, it was very hard. And so, if there's anyone listening who thinks it was hard for me because I did something wrong, that's absolutely not true. It's hard for you because the system is just stacked against how it's meant to go, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you gave me chills. I had this moment. I was like, preach, sister, preach, because it's true. I feel like so much of, as I've had my own evolution as a clinician in this field, I realized that I've gone from being okay, these are the things that you should do to keep you and your baby healthy, safe, et cetera, to being no, I'm just your support person. I'm trying to lift you up, because there's so much feedback that tends to be negative, whether it's what you're seeing in social media or what you're hearing on the news, all this information that's saying these are so many things that can go wrong. This is how it can go wrong. This is how you can make sure it doesn't go wrong. But it's really just recognizing you're doing the best that you can with what you're given, and really making sure that there's no sense of blame or shame. And again, putting the onus back on those of us who have the privilege of supporting birthers and people in the postpartum period, to say put it on us. Let us help you figure out what to do. Do you mind kind of sharing more about your postpartum experience, even though you were an expert yourself? What was that like for you?
No, I don't mind. It was a complete test to me as a woman, as a nurse, as a control freak, and as a mom. I mean, it was so I wasn't overly confident going into motherhood, given my history. I was very much thought I am going to also be, starting at the ground, but I thought maybe I'd have a little bit of help being a lactation consultant, being a NICU nurse, maybe that would make it slightly easier. And it didn't, I mean, I had a great induction, which I'm very grateful for. I had a failed epidural, which was a bummer, but, great quick delivery. And then a completely disorganized baby, was not ready to feed. She struggled with reflux and colic. She cried constantly, did not sleep. Feeding her was, I had multiple colleagues. I have a great tribe of lactation consultants out here who I adore. Had a doula I think rises the sun and sets it nightly. But still, she just would not latch. She could not do it. It was like a cruel joke. And because of what I do, I really committed. And also because I'm a nurse, I tried everything but medication for her reflux. And it really just pushed me to the edge. Because like you said earlier, we have this idea that because it's natural, it should be easy. That, if I have this unmedicated birth, I'm a strong woman. It's no, if you need the medication, take it. You're a strong woman either way.
Yeah.
But I still had that mental thing, I need to try everything before I medicate her, because there's something it's a failure of my nursing if I have to medicate this child, which is totally absurd. Anyway, 4 months we put her on reflux meds, and it was the clouds parted, and she was a different baby. She was smiling. She was sleeping. She was breastfeeding beautifully. I mean, it went great after there. Obviously, there's ups and downs. Every mother has them. But that fourth trimester was such a test. But now that I'm removed enough from that experience, it's been such a example of how you just don't have control. And even given the most ideal circumstances for a successful feeding relationship, it can be an absolute gong show. So it's really helped my practice. And I say an abridged version of this story to so many of my clients who especially say like, oh, I'm sure it was so easy for you. And I'm like,
actually,
and I was like, nope, it sure wasn't. And so, yeah, it just goes to show that it's difficult, and you're a strong, capable, incredible mother, no matter what you do or how you do it.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much goes back to like this wanting to feign a locus of control, right? I think that in so many other aspects of our life, we do control. We control what we eat. We control what time we wake up. We control like where we go. But there's something about not only like pregnancy, labor, and the postpartum period that like I see many people trying to regain that control or find some semblance of it. And it's oftentimes not feasible, right? Because postpartum, you have a newborn that is just like figuring out their own world. They're trying to figure out how to communicate to you their own world. There's a lot that they have to learn. Your body is changing, your mind is changing, your environment, your relationships are changing, let alone the physicality that is pregnancy and labor. And so I feel like often have these conversations where, there's the birth plan, the birth preferences. This is what I want to happen. This is my ideal experience. And really coming into those conversations and saying, okay, that's great. Let's talk about like your birth wishes, your preferences. There's no such thing as a plan. Our only plan is like healthy mom, healthy baby, but like having to like let go and loosen the grip a little bit. And so, for whatever reason, whether it was that you were destined to go through this humbling experience, or honestly, I think we all get humbled by some of the bigger life changes of our lives. I'm not to project on you, but I'm sure that experience for you postpartum has informed how you care for your patients or your clients. Have you noticed a shift in like how you counseled and supported your clients pre Noble May and post? Obviously, you're great. You were great since 2017, 2018. Wondering if you actually have that locus of like, oh no, I know I'm a different version of myself, or I have a different approach now.
Yes, definitely. And you probably know this from starting out, like before you like really get in a rhythm with any practice in any part of medicine, you're very by the books. And so I think I was much more rigid about my plans before having my own child, or even just early in my practice. But it was always important to me before I started that I focus on the mental health aspect and where I have limitations there. So I have partnered with therapists to make sure that if I see warning signs for any mental health issue, that I'm referring for that, which has been even more so important to me now that I have my own child. But the other thing is just really emphasizing, which I did before, but now I think I'm even more so.
Yeah.
The question of, what do you want to do? How do you want to feed your baby? Not what you are told on Instagram, not what your mother-in-law said, not what what do you want to do? Not what you read. Yeah. Like when you close your eyes and you think about how this is going to go and how it's going to improve your relationship with your child, which I think is the most important part. How do you want to feed your child? And then we make a plan from there. And so I think I emphasize that more now that I've had my own.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to have more control, like you said, over your journey than it's made out to seem like your breastfeeding journey is something, or your infant feeding journey is something that is built for you, and you can build it and not feel shamed by that. That's my approach, which is very much a new school lactation consultant perspective. This is not like the La Leche League mission statement, but it is.
Yeah. Girl, I'm going to be honest. I want to send all my patients to you now. No, but this is how it should be. I think, LA is probably similar, but in the Bay Area, we're all type A. It's super intense here. We're all anxious. We're like, go, 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 go. You have people who are like up there at Google and Apple. They come like, yeah, I'm going to be like just the top performing mom ever. Right. They come in with this like, go-getter attitude. And then, they have this rude awakening that is, that again is pregnancy postpartum. And so I also find that those are the patients who I do worry about the mental health the most, in that you suddenly are plagued with these feelings of like, I'm failing, like I'm doing wrong, I'm not bonding with my baby. Like so much of that first, the only 2 postpartum visits we get, but so much of those visits are kind of checking in mentally and emotionally. And I do have my fair share of patients who a lot of the postpartum anxiety, depression is all around lactation, to the point where sometimes I find myself like messaging back, no offense. We have great lactation consultants or community, messaging back some of the ones who are in our hospital system saying, hey, you sent me this long note about like how you want, my patient to feed every couple hours, but she's also telling me she's like not sleeping and her sleep deprivation is not good for her mental health. Like, have we checked in with how she's doing mentally? Because this doesn't seem in line with the fact that we need her to be mentally well to care for herself and then care for her family. And so sometimes I feel like the system's at odds. And so I find you very validating in that, like sometimes like, okay, I want to support that. I know that breastfeeding is important. Like lactation is something that we should aim and strive to support the best that we can. But man, I'm looking at this woman who is just at the end of her rope, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get her sleep, how to get her to like have a little bit more self-love, and start recovering emotionally and mentally.
Yes. There is a bit of like there's a fine print below the breastfeeding can reduce the incidence and rates of postpartum depression and anxiety. And the fine print is, unless breastfeeding is at the expense of your mental health. So yes, chemically, the surge of oxytocin and the bonding happy hormone that you release during delivery, during sex, during breastfeeding can reduce the incidence of these things, but not if reaching that goal conflicts with your sleep and your mental capacity to take care and bond with your baby. So that's a really important distinction to be made, is like, yeah, it can reduce the incidence of postpartum depression and anxiety, but it can also exacerbate it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's such a delicate balance, and but you just have to meet everyone where they're at on feeding. And I truly believe that any amount of breast milk means that you're giving the benefits of that breast milk to your baby. So it's not all or nothing. It's not black or white, much to how the algorithm on Instagram will make you feel. It's just not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's empowering. Like I said, I feel validated in that oftentimes in that room, my bias is obvious that yes, when that baby was within my patients, like that baby was my patient too. The baby's out and they still really matter. But I see this person who is just like, gosh, working to the ends of their limit. And so in those moments, I oftentimes say, hey, but like right now I'm focused on you, because you can't care for the people that you love, including your baby, if you can't care for yourself. And sometimes I feel like, oh yeah, Dr. Nseo, like you're the OB. And so my hope is that more and more people in the lactation community are reinforcing this and really making sure that we're prioritizing all aspects of that person we get the honor of caring for. Have you noticed, like you said that yourself, you're in this like newer age of lactation specialists, but like when you go to conferences or community meetups, like what are the conversations that are happening behind the scenes amongst your specialists?
Lactation consultant just kind of implies that I'm gonna come in and shame you into breastfeeding and make you feel like you have to do it exclusively, when I think often that's not the desire of the parent, and sometimes not even the physical ability, despite what you do. You may do everything quote unquote right, and it may not work out. There is such a thing as just having insufficient glandular tissue to feed your baby fully. But I do strongly believe that any amount of breast milk given to a baby means that you are breastfeeding your child. It's not all or nothing. It's just important to me that we acknowledge the nuance about infant feeding and how so much of it is out of our control. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you feel similarly about delivery. Yeah. It's like you can, like you said earlier about a birth plan, you can plan, but the universe and the baby often has other plans.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much of what I've found so refreshing about our conversation so far is like you're realistic. You're really trying to have kind of open and candid expectations for what it is that a body may or may not be able to do. And find like a forgiveness and acceptance in that space. And I do think that there's like, I always say this, my arch nemesis are Dr. Google and Nurse TikTok. And then I guess Instagram's in there too. They're all of them are in there because there's a wealth of information and resources I think can actually be empowering in this day and age. And we're all kind of separated and siloed, and it can bring people together. But then it also is like, you're inundated with information and you're trying to sift through like, well, 10 people said the same thing, or this keeps on coming on my algorithm, so it must be true. And there's so many conversations I have, and I'm sure that you have, been like, well, maybe not. It's not completely like this. So what are some of the most like common myths, I'm putting in air quotes, that you find that you have to dispel or misunderstandings?
Anything that's made into a binary on the internet in a single post. So, I'm trying to, breast is best, I guess.
Yeah.
That's just, anything that's just this, we've dispelled so many issues in the early postpartum space into these phrases, and they're just much more nuanced. How is breast is best going to make someone with a double mastectomy feel?
Yep.
How is breast is best going to make someone who is on a medication that inhibits their ability to breastfeed their baby feel? It's just like, there's so much more nuance. Someone who's struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety and doesn't want to breastfeed their baby because the journey has actually exacerbated their relationship with that child. We shouldn't be selling that person breast is best. So that's one of them. Not that I don't, completely love and own the benefits of breastfeeding, but it's just much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of, I'll get calls from people saying, this is one example. I'm using this bottle, but I read online that I should be using a different bottle. And I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. Just this influencer said that this bottle's better and it worked better for her baby. And then I ask these other questions like, how's your baby feeding? Are they going back and forth between breast and bottle? Are they gaining appropriately? Are they upset after feeding from the bottle? Does the bottle work for you? Yeah, it's all good. Like everything's good. And so, you go on social media, everything's going fine. And then now suddenly you're like, wait, but should I? And we all have these creeping should I's, right?
Yeah.
I have creeping, like, should I feel bad about that? Am I a bad mom if I don't do that or use that? So diet stuff really bothers me. There's a lot of not evidence support diet limitations on the internet when it comes to breastfeeding. There's no real significant evidence that supports that any certain food would increase gassiness in an infant. So supplements that can help with supply, those things also very weakly supported by evidence. Some have some support. And that's where evidence-based practice even gets nuanced, as you know, because it's like, what kind of evidence? Is it like one study of 46 people in Australia?
Yep.
That's not so strong.
Yeah.
I'll take it because it's all we have, but it's not super strong. Even when people say this is an evidence-based approach, you have to look into how strong that evidence is. People, you just kind of have to know all that nuance. So I would say take almost everything you see online with a grain of salt, unless someone's telling you like the joy and pleasure of raising their child, then take it for what they're saying. But any of the other stuff that gives you a creeping doubt that you're not doing something correctly, I would just urge everyone to question it.
Yeah. I think that this is my selfish plug, the podcast, and that this is one of my goals for this, right? Is to have open, honest, frank conversations, acknowledging that we know what we know, but we also know that we don't know what we don't know, right? I think you and I both recognize that we're not also here to say absolutes. Like my favorite space to be is the gray, the nuance. When I was on call last night, and when I'm talking to the patients who things are like, well, tell me what to do. I'm like, oh no, that's not what I do. That's not how I practice. I love to share decision making. I love information. I love people being empowered with that information. But when that information is as relatively vetted as it can be. And so I think one of my goals of this podcast is bringing in experts like you, using experts in terms of the women who have birthed their babies before, because they know their own experience, that's their own truth, and having people hear that's my own selfish desire to kind of dispel some of the many mistruths that are floating out there. I'm definitely not an influencer, not remotely close, so maybe not enough people will get to hear these truths, but we can at least fight the good fight, because it feels like it's a battleground in a way that when it was simpler times in medicine, this wasn't a thing that we were quote unquote up against. And so it really feels like, okay, how do we make this mutually beneficial for all? Let's just make sure that we're doing our part to hopefully get some info out there, some real truths.
Totally. And I love what you said about the I don't know. I remember one of my beloved professors in nursing school said, your greatest power is your ability to say that you do not know the answer to something. Mm-hmm. As nurses, doctors, any sort of medical provider, you really, because you're out there to help, you feel this pressure to have answers to lots of the questions. And so now I kind of enjoy being able to be like, I don't know. There's some things that come up. I'd have to look into it, and I'll do my best to find you the answer, but I really don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah.
So I always say to question in a social media outlet that's telling you how you should do something, or that they have the answer for you, because everyone's just so different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I often say it's an honor to care for other humans, and it's also one of the most humbling things that we can do. And so part of that humility is coming face to face and saying, I'm here with you, I'm in this with you, but I might not have the answers. I might not be able to fix everything. And hopefully, human to human, we can sit in that space together. So I'd like to take a moment to tell you that this is my passion project based on years of experience as an OB/GYN doctor. I aim to empower moms and moms-to-be and those in the pregnancy and postpartum care space. If you appreciate what I do, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so it can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, suggestions, or questions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Okay, we've had some wonderfully deep philosophical conversations that is happening so organically, again, which I love, because I've not known you this long, but now I feel like we're kindred spirits. I want to kind of flip the page to more, I'm going to say simpler questions, but I think knowing how your brain works and my brain works, we're going to figure out a way to go into a deep dive. But I'm thinking about the things that I'm, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I literally see hundreds of patients a week, if not more. And amongst those patients are a lot of my postpartum mamas. And so I get the same questions oftentimes, postpartum and pregnancy. And so one question I often get from, again, very eager moms trying to tee themselves up for success is, what can they do in pregnancy to, prepare themselves for breastfeeding or improve their chances of being successful? Again, things in quotes. When it comes to breastfeeding, anything that you either suggest to your clients, whether it's evidence-based or not, things that you find helpful.
Yeah. So breastfeeding is a physical skill. I think that's not emphasized enough, just like riding a bike. So you could watch a video of someone riding a bike 100,000 times, and still, when you got on that bike, you'd have to feel it, right? Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't necessarily be able to ride the bike having watched the video.
Yeah.
So definitely set yourself up for success. If your goal is to breastfeed your child, by setting up a breastfeeding prep class and watching videos and learning hand expression, which evidence has said can help establish a greater supply faster. So hand expression is self-milking your own breasts. So learning how to expel milk with your own hand is very helpful. And then trying to watch a video on how to latch a newborn baby, which is a pretty specific physical skill. Mm-hmm. So setting up a class, looking into the physical skill part of it, that hand expression and the latch, and then setting up a relationship with a trusted lactation consultant who I would recommend having a quick phone call with before, Picking an LC, pediatrician, OB/GYN is similar to picking a therapist. It's got to be the right fit. So make sure that that person, shares your goals. That's the best you can do. And then the rest of it, for control freaks like me, a level of letting go and knowing that bike analogy that I said, which is that you can only do so much until you're doing it. And it's the physical practice of latching your baby and breastfeeding 8 to 12 times a day in those first 2 weeks where you're going to start to nail it. But that first day is going to feel like your first day at a new job, having gone through major surgery. I mean, it is tough, but you will get there. It will get better. And you will learn the skill just like the rest of us learn how to drive a car and learn a dance or ride a bike. So I think that's my best advice.
No, that's solid. That's solid. I wish there was I can put it on every door in our clinic, it will get better. I feel like I need to see that sometimes myself, to be honest, but especially when you're just when you're in the thick of it, just a reminder that this isn't forever. It's just the beginning.
Yes, it's just the beginning. And, you've gone through a major hormonal shift and now you're required to not only learn the physical skill of feeding your baby, but also teaching your child how to do it. Never in your life will you be expected to do something like this. It's something that should be heralded more often. The act of having a child and then feeding that child is unbelievably impressive.
Yes, it is. I mean, obviously, I think both of us are biased and we've chosen our fields for very specific reasons, but it's my constant reminder that our half of the species, if you will, I think we are the stronger of that side, and what we can do with our bodies, let alone mentally, is insanely strong. Even when those moments we feel the weakest, we actually are very, very strong. Especially when my husband gets a cough and he's like, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world. I'm coughing." I'm like, no, what did I see today? I've had people go through way worse. Chill out, bro. It's just a cough.
I jokingly call my husband Tiny Tim because of his unbelievably weak immune system. But we joke about that a lot.
Yeah. But my husband's like, my eye hurts. I'm like, okay, did you get something? He's like, no, I think there's a flu coming. I was like, wow, how is that? How is that going together? But okay, let's wait and see if your eye gets better. And then I'm like, okay, did you ever turn to the flu? I'm like, no, thank goodness. I'm like, all right, you're fine. You grown man. Anywho, we digress. Okay, other things that come up so often, and you hinted to it, so I want to actually spend more time in it. People are always asking about supplements to help with breastfeeding, increase breast milk supply. You talked about how the evidence is limited there. Are there any supplements that you recommend or offer your clients? And then what is the data around?
So it's similar to kind of what I touched on, which is that there is evidence. It's just small. In order for, I'm probably going to get these numbers lightly wrong, but I'm just going to kind of guess. In order for a drug to be approved, I mean, it needs hundreds of thousands of people having taken it in trial. We need a lot of research for a medication to be approved in this country. Before the first lay person got the vaccine outside of the healthcare system, I think something like 95,000 people had gotten it. This is big numbers. We've got lots of data. Before we expand it to the greater population. And that's because we live in this country where there's a lot of threat of litigation. And so we need to, check ourselves. With herbs, we just don't have as much evidence. But I think, based on the research I've done on my own, that the two that have the strongest evidence to support their use is moringa and goat's rue. So I do use those two.
Yeah.
But the number one way to bring up a supply is to remove more milk. And removing more milk involves pumping, breastfeeding more frequently than you are before you've tried to raise that supply.
Yeah.
But it's really important to keep in mind that, like I said earlier, there are some women who cannot produce a full supply for their infant, and it is no fault of their own. And we don't know why either. And I wish I knew the answer to that. and wish as a lactation consultant that I had a magic wand to bring up women's supplies because I use it all the time. So yes, those are the two herbals that I recommend. But again, they don't have great evidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's true of all herbals.
Yeah. And so you said moringa and goat screw. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, goat screw and moringa have the strongest evidence.
Okay.
So those are the two, but generally the herbals aren't going to bring up a supply or any dietary stuff as much as just removing more, just based simply on how the hormonal loop of lactation works. The more we remove, the more we make.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many times where I see patients not only on like the brink of like postpartum anxiety, depression because of all this external and internal pressure, but also just like this desperation of like, well, I want to try anything and everything. And someone said this and someone said this, and I've been taking this. And so, I always want to be able to offer something that someone like you who's, well-resourced and researched can recommend, but also with that grain of salt, as you said, of like, hey, but the evidence isn't strong. It's safe enough for you to try, but don't be relying on this is going to be the cure all. I think it's the same way I feel. I'm like obviously blanking on the name in the hot seat, and I'll blame the fact that I worked last night, but there's a prescription medication.
Domperidone?
Yeah, domperidone.
Yeah,
so
which is
technically, yeah, go ahead. I'm sure you have your thoughts on that, girl. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, domperidone. So domperidone it's a dopamine antagonist. So it blocks the dopamine and prolactin, which is the milk making hormone, have kind of opposing effects on one another. So if you drop dopamine, you rise prolactin. Domperidone is not approved by the FDA. So you cannot obtain domperidone in the States. A doctor can't prescribe it. I can't recommend it because it's not approved for that use. But I can tell you what Google could tell you. Which is that the special thing about domperidone is that it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So it will not as likely cause any sort of mental health side effects as a medication which is approved in the United States, not specifically for lactation's use, but it's called Reglan. So domperidone can work, but not if you have insufficient glandular tissue. So if if your breasts do not contain enough glands to produce a full breast milk supply for your baby to gain appropriately, the domperidone won't help. But it can, and it's used in Canada pretty frequently.
Yeah, I was going to say, we tell patients to go to Canada if they want to try to get it, not go. But pharmacies in Canada.
Yes. Do your own research. And of course. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about why it's not approved here. There's like some swirling around about how it's also, these dopamine antagonists are, they're anti-nausea medications. Reglan's used very frequently in patients on chemotherapy. And they're very effective. So some people think like, we've got enough anti-nausea medications here. Maybe that lobby is blocking and then some people think the formula companies, I don't know if there's any truth to any of that, but yes, you can definitely look into domperidone as an alternative. That is the prescription medication alternative to a solution to low supply. I would say, I think our caveat as OBs is it can very rarely cause changes in your heart, like the way that your electricity moves through your heart. Yes.
So it can cause changes to your EKG. And so I think that's one of the main reasons why it's not FDA approved, is like that has to be monitored in a way that the FDA doesn't recommend. And so that's always that caveat that we mention to patients, is just being mindful of that very rare risk. And if it's not a medication we're prescribing, we don't have a way of kind of monitoring for that. But
yes, 100%. It can mess with electricity in the heart. And so that is a risk. And if you do end up going on this, under your own research, you have to wean off of it very slowly. Because anything that's messing with those chemicals should just be weaned off slowly, just like an antidepressant would.
Yeah, you have to be careful. Okay, other hot topics. I think we talked already about low milk supply, and understanding that some of that is just like due to your natural like biology or physical structure. How about like latch difficulty. So you talked about how if you're trying to prep for pregnancies, recognizing how truly physical breastfeeding is. And so like learning the mechanics and teaching yourself in that way. How do you kind of help moms who have difficulties with latch? Obviously understand that it's hard because we're talking about this via podcast, and you are probably pretty physical when you're working with your clients, but what are some of your main takeaways?
So my favorite video, and I've donated to their cause many times because I use their video constantly, is by a group, Global Health Media Project. And the video is called Attaching Your Baby at the Breast. They have the most comprehensive, easy to follow, incredible video on latching. So if you are listening to this and need help or want to watch it before delivery, that is another kind of answer to your question earlier about what you can do. You can watch that video.
Yeah.
The most important part about early latching after delivery is lining up the baby in the right spot. Babies like to drink at the breast the same way that we drink from a cup, with an extended head and neck. It protects their airway and pops their nose off the breast. So lining up a baby nipple to nose, almost as if they're going to latch just below the nipple, planting their lower jaw, and then just barely getting their upper lip over your nipple, is the best possible scenario for a painless latch that is going to be nutritive. So when a baby latches to the breast, they actually need to be latched on your areola. So I have people say all the time, I don't have big nipples, or my nipples are flat. Breastfeeding is just that. It's breastfeeding. They're feeding on your areolar tissue and not just your nipple. So lining that baby up, nipple to nose, chin first, is going to be your best bet to get a good latch. And then looking up that video, Global Health Media Project, Attaching Your Baby at the Breast.
Yeah. Perfect. Boom, boom. Okay. And then oftentimes we get calls from patients about engorgement, clogged ducts, blebs, nipple blisters, right? I'm sure like all the now I've mastered the latch. I think I have a good supply, but ouch. What is your advice about these ouchies? Knowing that honestly, each of these ouchies are its own civic problem.
Yes. So our protocol like 10 years ago was very different. We kind of treated the breast like a muscle. Heat it up, massage it out, pop that breast like a zit. And then recently, spearheaded by Dr. Katrina Mitchell in Santa Barbara, who's a breast surgeon and a lactation consultant, realized the breast is a gland. And one of the, main things about a gland is it's highly vascularized, which means there's a bunch of blood vessels running through it. If something has a bunch of blood vessels running through it, it's very prone to inflammation. So if you think of your breast if you cut the stem off of a broccoli and you're looking at where you cut, you've got all these little florets of milk ducts running through your breast that terminate in like anywhere from 6 to 13 holes in your nipple. And so you've got all these little rivers running through all of this tissue in your breast with supportive fluid, all these inflammatory markers, all these blood vessels. And so if any part of that breast gets inflamed, all those little rivers are going to get blocked. So we used to blame the milk. We'd say, the plug is causing the inflammation, but it's actually the other way around. The inflammation is causing the plug. So our new protocol with plugging and mastitis prevention is bring down the inflammation. The second you feel a knot or an area of fullness, apply ice to that area and take Advil for 12 to 24 hours. If you do that as early as possible, you can most likely avoid infection, unless you've got a cut on your nipple that is an avenue for bacteria to get in. And then sometimes it is unavoidable, unfortunately. The antibiotics work very fast, but ice and Advil and making sure that you reduce the amount of damage to the nipple tissue as much as you can. Everyone has their own approach with damage on the nipple. I use moist wound healing, which is just like a really big, generous glob of nipple tissue onto a clean, dry breast pad, and applying that to your nipples in between feeds keeps everything super moist. It helps the tip of the nipple heal from the base up, rather than scab and pull it off and scab and pull it off. We want to avoid that. So moist wound healing. Hydrogel pads, I love those. They're used in burn victims, and your nipple tissue is super sensitive, but it heals really fast. So that moist wound healing, hydrogel pads. People love silverettes, these little like silver cups. Breast milk has bacteria and fungal fighting properties in it. So hand expressing a little bit into that silver cup and applying it to your nipples in between feeds can also reduce inflammation, bacteria, fungus, chafing. Silver does have some evidence to support that it's antibacterial as well. So that's going to be helpful too. So I'm kind of getting into the weeds. There's a ton of different ways you can reduce inflammation in your breast, and everyone kind of has their own approach. There's no one right way to do it. I usually say, if it's soothing, do it. No? If getting in the shower and heating up your breast before breastfeeding is soothing, totally do it. You're opening up that vasculature. That blood vessel in your breast, if it's opened up, is going to open up the channel of where you make milk. You make milk through your blood vessels. Mm-hmm. So heat it up if it feels good. But definitely if you've got some inflammation, treat it like a sprained ankle. Put some ice on there and take some Advil if you can.
Yeah. No, I mean, so much of our conversation so far, as I said before, is very validating. And this is a piece of it, right? I remember literally our like OB/GYN world had been rocked. I think it was probably about now 2 years ago when one of our local breast surgeons, who's also a breast lactation specialist, and I think it's great that there are more like that because they are able to just deal with some of the surgical complications that can happen from really severe mastitis. She gave our group a talk because we're always, being in healthcare means that you're lifelong learners. And so I remember when she kind of introduced this concept of, treat the breast like a gland, ice and ibuprofen. We were all like, what? Huh? And so it's changed how I kind of counsel patients now. It's changed, when patients call into our office and they're kind of telling us signs of either early mastitis versus engorgement, saying, nope, no heat, no massage. We can kind of curb this before we need antibiotics. And I mean, maybe it's anecdotally, but for all those calls that we get, I feel like anecdotally, at least for my patients, I'm prescribing less antibiotics because I do think that we're actually approaching it the way that we should. And man, why did it take so many years for us to make this revelation? Why?
It's down to that kind of how little information we actually have. We still don't know the extent to what breast milk contains. So, I say that I don't love breast as best, but I also don't love formula as best either. But there is no best, we're really at like the infancy of what we know about this stuff. But it is funny as a nurse to be like, why wouldn't we treat the breast like it's prone to inflammation? Why are we beating the crap out of it and putting massagers on it? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Back to my appreciation of you, which is, being realistic and humble in that space. Okay. I think I have one hot topic question. So I think something that often comes up as well is, as you alluded to before, society is different. People are choosing to start families later in life. Moms do have really careers that they are proud of and are returning to. And so what advice do you give a mom who's transitioning back to work, still is planning on feeding in some capacity, whether it's pumping, et cetera? What is kind of your usual back to work plan or advice? Maybe it's not usual because I know it's individually based, but how do you approach that?
Yeah. So the kind of logistical stuff, which is, ensure that you have a place to pump at work and a place to store that milk. Be kind to yourself. The transition back to work can be fraught. For me, what was unexpected about returning back to work is how it brought a lot of joy to my motherhood experience. It reminded me who I was. That was separate from my daughter in ways that I think enriched my relationship with her. And so that was what was shocking to me, but it can also be tough. So being kind to yourself in that way. Physical separation between mother and child just chemically can cause a drop in supply. So that is normal and to be expected. You can make up for it at other times of day. And then, making a plan with a lactation consultant can be really helpful, just to write it all down and make sure you have it all ironed out. And I think that's it. Yeah. Just logistically making sure you're good to go. Emotionally, make sure you're covered, and then making a plan with a trusted provider.
Yeah.
And knowing, again, that I've said, I think this is the third time I've said it, so sorry, but it bears repeating. Any amount of breast milk you're giving your baby means you're breastfeeding. So it's not all or nothing, and be kind to yourself. And then, so I guess I'll add an anecdote. When I was going back to work, I felt guilty that I felt a sense of coming back to myself. I felt like that was bad. Like, I think I should only identify as a mother. And if this thing and this empowerment in my job makes me feel so good, does that take away from my motherhood experience or mean that I'm bad? Like I should be missing her more than enjoying my work. And my therapist was like, why don't you think about it this way? How do you want her to see you as a woman and a mom? Like, do you want her to see you as a empowered working mom, or do you want her to see you differently? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. I definitely want to see her. And I want her to see me enjoying my work and identifying as like a proud nurse and lactation consultant. So that was a big aha moment. It might seem obvious to you, but it wasn't to me. And I've thought about that a lot since. When I go take a girls' trip for 2 nights, how do I want her to see me, as a person who enjoys her friends and her time? And I want that for her too. I think I had this embedded social pressure that once you're a mom, you have to give up everything. And that's not true.
Yeah. No, it goes back to that social pressure. We've already pointed our finger at Instagram and TikTok and Google, et cetera, because it's true. I think what what you said isn't heard enough. Again, not to plug the obvious, but like, this is why we're having this conversation, because I just want people to hear your truth, because I do think that we are, and I'm prone to it. Like my degree of like self-loathing and self-doubt and like the voices that are spinning in my head, we're constantly combating. And so just hearing someone say, oh no, there's, how do you want to be seen? How do you want your daughter to know you? Giving yourself like freedom to be like, oh no, there's multiple facets of me. Like the person I was pre-Noble May is still the person I am. And I want to nourish those pieces of me so she can, like develop her own individualism and complexity in her own self. And so thank you. Like, thank you for sharing that anecdote.
Of course. And then, when it comes to feeding, what happened with us when I went back to work is she was getting a lot more bottles and she didn't breastfeed as frequently. And that was hard for me, but that was my journey and I really couldn't get her back there. And I'm a lactation consultant. So if you're experiencing that was my journey as well. The breastfeeding journey is not linear at all. It really isn't. So, I went back to work at 3 or 4 months. We probably did mostly bottles, maybe 1 or 2 breastfeeding sessions until 6 to 9 months. And then she went through this phase where she was like, I'm totally into breastfeeding. And I was like, oh, this is out of nowhere. Of course, right when I was like thinking about weaning it at 12 months. So this is just my experience to explain that it's not linear. It's totally up and down. Breastfeeding super sloppy. What's a problem this week is a solution next week. Like everything is just kind of all over the place. Back to that, the theme of our conversation, one of the themes, which is the control part. It's very hard to control. So as much as you can ride the wave of the feeding experience, the better, and just adapt to every change that takes place either in you or your child, using your inner voice and not social media or friends or in-laws, I think is another, I guess, small piece of advice I would give that I haven't always taken, but I would try to ride the wave as much as you can.
Yeah.
As I tried to do and often failed, but tried.
But try, that is the word, right? We just got to try. And so it's even like not even beating yourself up to be like, okay, I know I should try to give myself a space of grace and I should try to, but like, darn it, I'm feeling like in this moment, I want to be controlling. I want to feel like I want to sit in this moment of anxiety a bit. Fine. At least you're trying, right? That's in the end. We just have to give ourselves credit too. Man, I literally can talk to you for hours. I said this at the beginning and I really do mean it because I find what you are sharing just so refreshing and so important. And I just want voices like yours to be amplified and shared as widespread as possible. You've been so generous of your time. I want to give space for you to kind of tell us more about nesting lactation. Tell us more about what you do the clients you get to serve. This is kind of a time for you to give yourself a well-deserved plug, if you will.
My gosh, happy to. No, This has been, I could talk about this stuff forever. It's my favorite thing to talk about. Love talking about humans, love talking about breastfeeding in the postpartum space. So I have a private practice, Nesting Lactation. It's just me. I do newborn care and prenatal breastfeeding classes. Registered nurse and a international board certified lactation consultant. So if you did want to take a class, exactly. If you want to take a class from anywhere in the world, I can teach you. I do take some insurance plans, mostly PPO plans. And I do have an Instagram, but again, I tried to play that game for a while. I wasn't great at it, but I do have it there for education purposes, nesting.lactation. I have a little blog on my website. I sometimes contribute to blogs on various startups trying to solve all these problems that we discussed today. But if you're in LA, I would love to help you with infant feeding or newborn care, and check out my website and Instagram for any educational needs.
I love it. And, so much of our conversation was the fact that we just naturally went into like kind of deep philosophical dives, because I do think that I think people oversimplify like getting pregnant, being pregnant, having a baby, feeding that baby, and everything else in between. Like that is my biggest takeaway from for the amount of years that I have. It's not that simple. It truly is not. And so with everything that you've shared so far, what would be like your final takeaway message or piece of loving advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
The first thing that comes to mind is I go into like 12 to 15 different homes every week. And, I'm not a therapist, so I don't see these women every week as much as I would love to. I have to always kind of seek a new patient. So I see women trying to feed very frequently. And if you think that you are alone in it being difficult, if you think that you are alone in feeling like you're failing at it, or you're a failure yourself, or you're not strong enough to do it, or all of these kind of dark inner thoughts that we can have when we're beating ourselves up in the early postpartum space, you are not alone. Everyone feels that way. Everyone has insecurities. These things are incredibly nuanced. They could not be made cut and dry. And I think that people love being vulnerable about the things that they struggled with. So we're not really telling the stories of where things were hard in order to protect our ego or our own self-esteem. So I guess I will say, having looked behind the curtain, that it's hard for most people. And so if you feel that way and you feel like you're the only one, you're not.
Yeah. So well said. I'm like a corny kid who like my soundtrack is like 90 songs. So I'm hearing this Michael Jackson song, "You Are Not Alone." Anyway, it's true.
Truly.
It is true.
Truly. Yeah. It's like the couple that says like, we never fight, and then they bicker all through dinner. And you're like, no one's admitting what's going wrong in their lives, but everyone's a mess. So we're all a mess.
We're a beautiful mess.
Exactly.
As we should be.
Yeah.
Again, this is why I love having conversations like this. I want people to not feel alone. I want people to feel like it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be messy. It's okay. That there are people like you, like me, and everyone else in this small birthing community that are working hard to recreate tribe and village. So Sarah, gosh, I am just so honored by you. I've loved this conversation. I want more time, but I know I've heard there's a nanny awaiting, being relieved from their duty. So I got to let you go. But seriously, thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This has been so lovely. And next time I'm up in the Bay Area, I'll force you to have a coffee with me.
Yeah, yes. Please give me a holler. All right. Thanks again.
Of course.
Thank you very much for listening to The Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be can hear stories from other mothers and learn from top experts in pregnancy and postpartum care. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, stay golden.